things aren't necessarily going our way offensively. I don't think there's nothing wrong with him wanting better.
This is my home, but you just see frustration because obviously, we want to be great, and most definitely, I want to be great as well.
So the Philadelphia Eagles just lost their first game of the season, and it wasn't just any loss. This was a collapse, a meltdown, a total implosion in the fourth quarter where they managed just 9 yards on 4 straight drives. But here's the thing, this loss was coming from a mile away, and it all starts with one of the pettiest and strangest dramas I think we've ever seen. I'm talking about AJ Brown and Devontae Smith, two of the most talented receivers in the NFL, who have been watching from the sidelines as the Eagles turned into a glorified ground and pound offense. They spoke up, demanded the ball, and the Eagles listened. They went pass heavy against the Denver Broncos of all teams, and they abandoned Saquon Barkley completely in the second half and promptly lost their first game. This is a story of how the defending Super Bowl champions might be imploding from within in one of the pettiest ways I think I've ever seen. So real quick before we get to the content, this video is sponsored. We've been on a generational run on Prize Picks. We hit on 5 of our picks on Sunday and made over $1,000, and you guys have been blowing up my inbox on Instagram letting me know about it. I'm personally really happy we're all winning big, and I have a wild play for Thursday Night Football. So first, make sure you sign up for Prize Picks using my promo code Mikerophone so you can get $50 in plays when you make a play of $5 or more. And then follow this crazy pick for Thursday Night Football. I'm gonna try to turn $20 into $350. I have Devontae Smith's longest reception being at least 15 yards. Dallas Goedert has been on a touchdown streak. I think he's gonna get another one in this game against the Giants. I think Jackson Dart will be good for at least 1 pass TD, and this is the riskiest one of all. I think AJ Brown scores a touchdown in this game. He's had a conversation with Jalen Hurts and Saquon Barkley. They've been trying to figure out a way to get him more involved. If you think that's too risky, feel free not to include it, but I'm including it myself. I'm gonna have additional plays on Thursday in my Discord server. If you want to check that out, click on the WAP link in the description down below. We've been profiting on a daily basis, and there's baseball picks in there as well. And thank you, Prize Picks, for today's sponsor. Mic check 1 2 1 2. What's going on, everybody? We gotta set the scene here so you guys can understand the context of how absurd the situation is. The Eagles beat the Kansas City Chiefs in last year's Super Bowl. Jalen Hurts was named Super Bowl MVP after scoring 3 total touchdowns and setting the Super Bowl record for rushing yards by a quarterback with 72 yards. The defense was absolutely dominant, holding the Chiefs scoreless on their first 9 drives. And the engine behind it all, the difference maker this time, was without a doubt Saquon Barkley. Saquon finished the season with an NFL record 2,504 rushing yards when you combine the regular season and the postseason. During the regular season alone, he rushed for 2,005 yards on a career best 5.8 yards per carry. Absolutely historic numbers. The Eagles had found their formula: run the ball, control the clock, let the defense dominate, and ride Saquon all the way to the championship. Once defenses started focusing on Saquon, that's when you go to AJ Brown and Devontae Smith. But at the same time, you have to account for the Eagles' dual threat QB. Defenses were in shambles trying to figure this out. There's so many layers and aspects to the Philadelphia Eagles offense that no matter what you try to focus on, there will be a way for the Eagles to move down the field. And to make things even worse, if you happen to get them into a 3rd and 1 or a 4th and 1 situation, they would just push their way into a first down. It is without a doubt unstoppable, and coming into the 2025 season, everyone expected more of the same. And at first, the Eagles started 4-0. They looked unstoppable on paper, but if you were actually watching the game, something was off, very off. The comparison I like to make in this situation is pretty much how the Kansas City Chiefs won games last year. Yeah, the win-loss record looks really good, but when you do a deep dive and look into the games, you'd understand that something is not going right. Through the first 4 games of 2025, the Eagles had the 2nd worst passing offense in the NFL, averaging just 138 passing yards per game. Could you think about that for a second? This isn't a team that's completely devoid of wide receiver depth, and this isn't a team that's running a one-dimensional offense. They're the defending Super Bowl champions with a roster loaded with talent, and they're just 31st in passing yards. Only the Tennessee Titans were worse. And for AJ Brown and Devontae Smith, this was becoming unbearable. Brown was averaging just 37.8 receiving yards per game through 4 weeks, compared to his career average of 85.7 yards per game through 4 games. He had just 14 catches for 151 yards and 1 touchdown. And Devontae Smith wasn't much better off. He had 158 yards and just 1 touchdown through 4 games. These are guys who have combined for multiple 1,000-yard seasons, and now they were on pace for less than 700 yards each. But the breaking point came after week 4 against Tampa Bay. The Eagles went 0 for 8 passing in the second half of that game with 0 completions. Jalen Hurts literally didn't complete a single pass in an entire half of football, and the Eagles still won 31-25. And that's when AJ Brown posted his infamous cryptic tweet saying, "If you're not welcomed, not listened to, quietly withdraw. Don't make a scene, shrug your shoulders and be on your way." Now, AJ Brown tried to walk this back later, saying it wasn't aimed at anyone specific and that he was just venting about his personal life. But come on, everyone knew what this was about. And if you don't believe me, well, here's AJ Brown just before their previous game in week 5.
We're struggling, and I'm a guy that wants the ball in those times when we can't find a way. Give it to me. Like when the game's on the line, give the ball to me. I want that.
And what's crazy about this is Devontae Smith publicly agreed with him prior to their matchup versus the Denver Broncos.
Things aren't necessarily going our way offensively. There's nothing wrong with him wanting better. I certainly feel the same way. Offensively, we need to be better, and I think there's nothing wrong with voicing that.
Both of them wanted something to change, specifically in the red zone. And here's the real kicker about the Eagles' offensive philosophy this year. One league source told Diana Rossini, right now for the Eagles, it's run, 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 Hurts off schedule, pass, tush push. For their receiver, that means when they get to the red zone, they aren't getting the ball, and they know it, hence the frustrations. But what made this whole situation even more complicated was the relationship between the key players involved. Brown and Hurts have a long history. They were high school and college friends turned NFL teammates, and Hurts is the godfather to Brown's daughter. Do you guys remember Jalen Hurts and AJ Brown's reaction when AJ Brown was traded from the Tennessee Titans to the Philadelphia Eagles?
Hey, let's do it, man. Hey.
A former teammate once described them as an old married couple, but sources told Rossini that they're not that close these days. It's functional and professional, as one Eagles player described it. Look, life happens, family responsibilities, the grind of being pros, shifting priorities. The chemistry that once made them unstoppable is not quite what it used to be. Now, while Brown was making headlines on social media, Devontae Smith originally was keeping his frustrations more private. But when reporters asked him about it before the Broncos game, Smith didn't sugarcoat anything.
Things aren't necessarily going our way offensively. I don't think there's nothing wrong with him wanting better in that situation. I certainly feel the same way.
Smith went even further, saying he has every right to feel however he feels. We're competitive. We're guys that are getting paid. So we want to be able to come out here feeling like we're doing our job. And then he dropped this gem. There's nothing wrong with two alpha males. Two alpha males who want the football, who feel like they're not doing their job because they're not getting opportunities. And heading into week 5 against the Broncos, the message was clear. Feed us the ball or this is going to become a problem. So the Eagles heard them loud and clear. They went into the Broncos game with a completely different game plan in very unique circumstances. I mean, if you wanted to go pass first, I wouldn't do it against one of the best passing defenses in the NFL. Like in one of my prize picks, I actually took the under on AJ Brown receiving yards, primarily because he had a rough start to his year this year, and he was being guarded by the best defensive back in football, Patrick Surtain II. And look, the Eagles offensive coordinator came out aggressive, calling plays to get Brown and Smith involved early. And you know what? It actually worked, for a half at least. On their opening drive after halftime, the Eagles drove 74 yards on just 4 plays. Passes to Devontae Smith and Dallas Goedert got them across midfield. And then Saquon Barkley caught a pass from Jalen Hurts and ran 47 yards for a touchdown. Hurts found Smith for a massive 52-yard reception on 3rd and 17 that set up a touchdown pass to Dallas Goedert. AJ Brown drew a huge pass interference call on Patrick Surtain II, the reigning defensive player of the year, at the goal line. This was impressive. The Eagles were up 17-3 early in the 3rd quarter, and it looked like they had figured it all out. The passing game was humming, the receivers were involved, and they still had Saquon Barkley in their back pocket if they needed to close out the game on the ground. Except they completely forgot about that last part entirely. Here's where things get absolutely insane. With 5 minutes left in the 2nd quarter, Saquon rips off a 17-yard run, his longest run of the year at that point. He was averaging 6 yards per carry on his first 5 attempts. The reigning NFL Offensive Player of the Year, was cooking. And then he got one more carry the rest of the game. One. That's it. Saquon Barkley, who set the NFL record for rushing yards in a single season, was given 6 total carries against the Broncos. 5 in the first half, 1 in the second half. The Eagles were up 2 scores in the second half, and they completely abandoned their best player. Instead, they kept throwing, kept trying to prove that they could win through the air. Could you understand how insane this is? Whenever you're up by 2 scores, you're typically just pounding the rock so you don't slow down the game. And then the fourth quarter happened. The Eagles' offense completely fell apart. Meanwhile, penalties were absolutely killing them. Defensive holding in the end zone on Quinyon Mitchell, holding on Brent Toth to wipe out a big first down run by Saquon, illegal man downfield on Tyler Steen to erase a first down completion to Smith, an illegal shift by Saquon Barkley to wipe out a 30-yard gain to Devontae Smith, and then unnecessary roughness on Zach Bond. 5 penalties in 13 minutes, all in the fourth quarter. But probably the moment that everyone's talking about the most is a critical moment in the third quarter where Jalen Hurts appeared to overthrow and open AJ Brown on what would have been a 61-yard touchdown. And people are wondering, whose fault is this? Is it AJ Brown's fault for slowing down for some reason and potentially taking the play off? Or is it Jalen Hurts' fault for overthrowing AJ Brown? The Broncos, meanwhile, kept running the ball at will. J.K. Dobbins carried it 20 times for 79 yards and a touchdown. And the Broncos finished with 130 rushing yards at a 4.5-yard average. They knew the Eagles couldn't stop the run, so they just kept pounding it. The final score, Broncos 21, Eagles 17. Philadelphia's first loss ended an 11-game winning streak dating back to last season. And after the game, AJ Brown didn't hide from it.
The inconsistency showed up again.
And you know what? He was absolutely right. The Eagles had gotten exactly what their receivers wanted, a pass-heavy attack, and they couldn't execute when it mattered most. Devontae Smith had his best game of the season with 114 yards on 8 receptions. Brown got his targets, 8 of them, but they still lost. Saquon Barkley's stat line is probably the craziest of them all. 6 carries for 30 yards, plus 3 receptions for 58 yards and a touchdown. The irony is almost painful. The Eagles abandoned the formula that won them a Super Bowl, feeding Saquon Barkley and playing dominant defense to appease their frustrated receivers, and it blew up in their faces spectacularly. Now here's where this gets really interesting from a long-term perspective, because this isn't just about one loss, this is about the identity of the Philadelphia Eagles going forward, and whether AJ Brown fits into that identity. League sources have been telling reporters that while the Eagles haven't shopped Brown and told teams in the offseason that there was no chance of a trade, rival executives are watching closely. One NFL GM said that they're paying roughly $50 million to 2 wide receivers, and they aren't even that involved. They may move on simply because Philly is a run-heavy team. Even if AJ Brown wanted a trade, it probably wouldn't happen because of how complicated things are. Any trade before June 1st, 2026 would hit the Eagles with more than $43 million in dead cap money. That's basically impossible to absorb. But ESPN's Jeremy Fowler reported that some executives he spoke to don't expect Philadelphia to trade Brown in season, but said it could be something to entertain in the 2026 offseason, saying that it's sort of the worst kept secret inside the league that Brown's love-hate relationship with Philly's passing game bubbles to the surface from time to time. He's a true competitor and wants to be great. With that comes emotion and inevitable frustration. But when asked directly if he wanted to stay in Philadelphia, Brown was adamant.
Are you happy here?
Absolutely. This is home. This is my home, you know. Unfortunately, I did it to myself, but this is my home, man. I love it here, you know. But you just see frustration because obviously, you know, we want to be great, and most definitely, I want to be great as well.
So where do we go from here? Well, history isn't being so kind to AJ Brown. This isn't the first time we saw this movie play out. The Buffalo Bills dealt with the frustrated wide receiver recently. They tried sitting down Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs to talk it out. It worked until it didn't, and eventually Diggs was shipped to Houston. One league source told Rossini that Brown doesn't realize how bad it could be. You think if Howie Roseman's going to eventually trade him, he's going to send him to a team with some elite quarterback? Think about how much worse it could be. Respectfully, he could still be on the 0-4 Titans. Life is good in Philly. That's a harsh reality check. Brown is on a team that just won the Super Bowl, with an elite offensive line, a generational running back, and a franchise quarterback who happens to be his longtime friend. And he's upset about not getting enough targets. But as another league source pointed out, look at last season. Philly was 2-2 and then settled in. There has to be some patience for the offense to come together. So where does Philly go from here? Well, they're 4-1, which is a great record, but this loss exposed some serious issues that aren't going away. First, they need to figure out their offensive identity? Are they a run-first team built around Saquon Barkley, or are they trying to become more balanced to keep their receivers happy? Because trying to do both against Denver clearly didn't work. Second, they need to address the penalty issues. You can't win in the NFL when you're committing 5 penalties in one quarter that wipe out big plays and extends opponents' drives. That's just undisciplined football. Third, and this is a big one, they need to figure out the A.J. Brown situation. Sources told Rossini that Eagles coach Nick Sirianni and GM Howie Roseman have already had private conversations with Brown to hear him out, and they're managing the situation, but managing it and solving it are two completely different things. A rival head coach put it this way after studying the Eagles: you don't let A.J. Brown tell you he isn't getting enough targets. It's not about the quantity, it's about the type of targets and the situations he's in. That's why he's frustrated, and that's the real issue here. Brown isn't just upset about not getting volume, he's upset about not getting high value touches in scoring situations. The Eagles are 100% in the red zone this year, #1 in football, but they're getting there with Hurts running, with tush pushes, and with Saquon punching it in, not with their $32 million per year receiver. And here's the thing, the Eagles proved against Denver that completely abandoning their identity to feed the receivers doesn't work either. They were up 17-3 and should have closed the game out by running Saquon down Denver's throat. Instead, they kept passing, couldn't convert in crucial moments, and let a beatable Broncos team steal a win at the link. This brings us to the fundamental question at the heart of this entire mess. Can the Eagles win another Super Bowl with this current offensive philosophy and personnel? Saquon Barkley is averaging just 3.2 yards per carry through 5 games in 2025, after averaging 5.8 last year. His yards before contact have dropped from a running back best 3.8 yards per attempt in 2024 to just 1.7 yards this season. Part of that is the offensive line dealing with injuries. Landon Dickerson hasn't been as effective, and Lane Johnson has exited the last 2 games because of injury. But it's also the reality of what happens after a running back has a historic season. Of the 9 running backs who have rushed for 2,000 yards in a season, none were able to crack 1,500 yards the next season. Barry Sanders came closest with 1,491 yards in 1998. There's always some regression. So if Saquon isn't going to be the same force he was last year, does that mean the Eagles need to evolve into more of a passing team? That would make A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith happy, but it would also mean changing the entire identity that won them a championship just 8 months ago. So here's the bottom line. The Eagles are dealing with a classic championship hangover situation, but not in the way that most people think about. They're not complacent or lazy, they're 4-1 and still one of the best teams in the NFC, but they're struggling with the tension between what won them a Super Bowl and what their star players want moving forward. A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith aren't wrong for wanting to be more involved. They're elite receivers being paid elite money, and they still want to perform at an elite level. That's completely reasonable. But the Eagles aren't wrong for wanting to stick with the formula that just won them a Super Bowl. Saquon set an NFL record last year, and their defense was dominant in the Super Bowl. Why would you abandon that? The Broncos game proved that you can't just flip a switch and become something that you're not. The Eagles tried to become a pass-first team to keep their receivers happy, and they lost a game that they should have won easily. 9 yards on 4 fourth quarter drives is embarrassing. Giving Saquon Barkley 1 carry in an entire half is coaching malpractice. Moving forward, the Eagles need to find a balance. They need to get Brown and Smith involved without completely abandoning their identity. They need to use Saquon effectively while also keeping their receivers engaged. And most importantly, they need to remember that winning is what matters, not whether individual players are happy with their stat lines. Because at the end of the day, everybody eats when you win. And right now, the Eagles just learned a painful lesson about what happens when you try to force feed players at the expense of your winning formula. So let me know in the comment section down below, how should the Eagles fix this mess? Should they trade A.J. Brown in June? I'd like to hear what you have to say. Aside from that, I'm your boy Mike, and I'm dropping our mic until our next upload.